Night walks the streets in a black velvet gown, casting peace and happiness over a quaint little town. Tiptoeing in each tiny door, her hand is magic, her spell is sure. Night walks the streets in a black velvet gown. This is the first poem I ever wrote. I was about 6 years old when I wrote it. And I remember I looked up into a very dark, pitch black room, and I heard this poem recited to me. That's how I encounter poems. My name is Elizabeth Martina Bishop. I write poems, novels, plays, monologues. I've written over 70 books. The wedding will not take place. That's my favorite. And the reason for that was because when I watched my daughter prepare her trousseau, I began thinking, how would her trousseau differ from someone from Afghanistan who might be on horseback and taken across the desert and asking permission from her father, but he was blind, so he couldn't really see the groom. And then I really took all the knowledge I had of that culture, and I read 129 books on that culture, and then contrasted it with the culture of plenty. It was exciting for me to write, and one of the other things about it that was exciting was Roger. And Roger was a cohort, a colleague in Bowling Green State University, where I was a professor of, guess what? Ethnic studies. It would have to be cultures. And Roger announced one day that he had been knighted by some invisible orders of spirits, and that he was now going to anoint everyone in the university so they could see God. Then he jumped off the roof of the house where he lived. He was my editor. And in the beginning of the book, I dedicate the book to him as an invocation to Roger and his life, and his children, his wife, and I wove him into the text of the book. So I think that has something to do with it. I think what inspires me to write is the joy of being here with you, with people, and meeting people, and it's like an extended conversation with people. I lived in Ireland for 14 years, that I was teaching in a prefab building, and the course was not very interesting. It was perhaps in civics or economics or mathematics that they had to pass for their vocational training. And as I was standing teaching in the building, one of the young lads took apart the prefab. So by the end of the class, I was standing in an open field. So I just mentioned to the principal that I thought it was unusual. And he said, I will speak to his sister about it in the pub next Thursday. And ever after that time, whenever I saw Vincent in town, he said, hello, miss, you remember me? I'm the one that took you apart. Well, I really had an unusual childhood in that I didn't have one. So the thing that happened first that was really interesting to me was one day I was in a playhouse, and it wasn't a tree house, but it was a card table covered with a little make-believe house that you can just drop over a card table and make it look like a house. And I was sitting in that, and my mother said, I have a contract for you to sign. And I said, oh, Mom, what is that? And she said, it says, because I couldn't really read very well at 7. And that's another story about how I couldn't read. And So she said, you need to sign here. And it said, I will leave this household and I will be taken by someone else in another family right at the age of 7. And this was done at the age of 4 or 5. So I knew that I wasn't going to be staying in that childhood home very long. And I can tell you, she did keep the contract, and she opened the door of the car, and she said, there's your new home. And the new home was the home of a very, very eccentric actress's mother, who edited the Catholic Commonweal. And she also ran Shakespeare Club dinners in her home. And everyone was expected to dress in an evening dress for dinner every night because of her position. And what happened was, when I walked into this house, I realized she was the mother of Jane Wyatt. And Jane Wyatt, you know, was married to Father Knows Best. And so we watched reruns of that program while she used to nod off to sleep every night. And one day I met Jane Wyatt and was so impressed. And she said, my mother keeps strange guests in the house. Did you come in through the attic window? I got in terrible trouble with Jane Wyatt's mother because I wrote in the school magazine called The Wheel a little story about her pet poodle named Beaumont, after Lord Beaumont. And when I did that, she didn't know that I was going to write an ode to Beaumont. And the fact that there was a butler who would be summoned when her dog jumped on a buzzer. So at these very formal meals with dressing gowns dressed to the nines would be featuring this little dog, it's a toy poodle, jumping on a buzzer to summon a butler. So I wrote this all up for the little newspaper in school. She found out and she said, you can never write an article about me again. So that probably stopped my writing for a while, but not for long. This is called Rosemary for Remembrance, and it has the feeling, for me, this poem, that every poem that you write is really about that extended art of conversation that we were talking about. Maybe you should speak to someone about this, about the memory of your friend who fell off the bus long ago, the friend who fell off the bus that others might see and perfectly understand beyond the body's frame, so that others might see past the flame of her being, beyond the fact of the body's theme, the body's chime, so that others might see beyond all limitation of rhyme into the body of the world's remarkable order of ocean and season, above all else, in consideration of another world, above all else, above everything else. Maybe you should speak to someone about this because of the world's shattered ceiling, about the fact the hospital staff told her, one step at a time, 10 years ago, when she fell off a bus and she was going blind, when you were going blind for what seemed an eternity, when you were going blind, when the kindness of ghost-ridden music had fled from beneath your body's roost, when the light of the world spooled within memory's floor, swam out from under your leather shoes. Maybe you should speak to someone about this about the doctored chronicles of fire contained in the story, about the woman who goes on feeding swans every day, charting a course for her unspeakable life. Thou whom I do not know, because of whose I am, cradled by an incredible medicine bundle, a lovely flower growing among impossible sparks. Maybe you should speak to someone about this, because I dwell in the infinite universe of pain and suffering, and because the walkways are always filled, crowded with sisters and speakers, and it always rains, because I am called she who brings the rain. Maybe you should speak to someone about this. I have to tell you about my early experiences in school, and this is a whopper. This is how not to teach a fifth grade student who can't write. It was terrible. I was in the fifth grade, and I was reading backwards, writing backwards, no hope. So what happened was my schoolroom teacher, Mr. Denio, and I always thought it was a great name, Denio, he sent me to this incredible teacher, and she announced that I was a poet and that I was going to write a poem, which I don't remember that one at all. But what happened was she put the poem in the locker. My homeroom teacher found the poem and took the poem and read it to the whole class. And I was mortified. I thought, it's my special teacher for the fact that I can't write and I can't read. She's helping me. And her name was Miss Griswold. And this is a betrayal, because he stood up in front of the whole class and said, do you know we have a class poet? And I was just horrified. But the funny thing is today I don't remember what the poem was. I felt so humiliated because I couldn't read and I couldn't write. Each morning, she sets about combing the long strands of my hair. That's Anna. I am sick with longing. I cannot stop my body from shaking. The murmuring of birds has been silenced. Everyone here lives behind museum glass. I cannot stop shaking. I have the sense that everything is too late in my life, that all that remains of my life is not here. Leaping up in my hands, the little veins of little or no account. Almshouses are filled with vagrants. Watercolors have an appeal for the masses who are astonished by sudden flashes of color. I know, but what are they looking for? What are they looking at? How can I lose my soul? I never found a home in which to house my spirit. For the past 3 years, I have lived behind locked doors, no open doors, doors locked tighter than fists that can hold a knife. But sometimes I think of spring. Under plum trees, you can die in spring, and no one will remark on it. No one will notice. The workhouse. Every day we do art. We do art and we make amazing masks from Africa. The blood of diaspora performs creation's mask. Do you know that? Anna may not know that. Everything is filled with blood. Without space, there is no time at all. What's listening? Who's listening? What's happening? Listen closely. Listen. Anna, you know Anna? She is reciting Crossing the Bar. It's by Alfred Lord Tennyson. Why? Why is she doing this? She really can't heal anyone, you know. At least that's what she says. Perhaps she knows my mother believes in God. Truly, she is not ashamed. She always did. She always believed in God. My father, he never did. Anna combs the knots from my hair. She always did that, too. I remember Mr. Hall because he slammed some books on the top of my head and said, "You'll never learn anything," and I never forgot that. Because I couldn't write. I had tremendous trouble with reading and writing, but then I learned that it was a mode of expression that was effortless after a while, even though it had been so difficult in the beginning because I was reading backwards and everything. Yeah. So that's part of the advice is, yes, I think it can save the life of someone like me who couldn't read and write. You know, the teachers were saying this is hopeless, and then I just kind of realized something that was fun. But then I had some wonderful teachers in the art of poetry, like Muriel Rukeyser and Emery Baraka and Anne Waldman, and the poets that I've known through my life have influenced me, like Jan Beatty. She's a very inspiring woman, very, very inspiring, because I think she takes people that might not have any confidence and give them confidence to be able to write. Well, one especially is Paula Meehan. I think she is so inspiring because she never separates anything from her life and her poems. She is wanting to put everything into the poem to represent her activism, her compassion, her immersion in the history of Ireland, and her immersion in the most deprived and disenfranchised situations that many women allow happens to them. And she is amazing inspiration for me because Gary Snyder was somebody she studied with. And so I knew Gary Snyder because my mentor at Bowling Green was on an island in Kyoto in retreat with him. So there was this lineage in the sense of knowing that I experienced in meeting her. So she's inspiring in every way as a poet and person when the two meet in She Walks Her Talk. I taught on an Indian reservation for over 15 years. And so immersed in that culture and being an ethnic studies teacher, that is my interest. So when you think about this poem, I hope you realize what it's about, because sometimes when I read poems, audiences say, what the hell was that about? Yeah. So this poem is called Ghosts. Foremothers bear little right to have their days foreshortened. Why must they wait? After scribbling on prison walls, asking, how long must we wait? Are they allowed to claim a portion of the bail money? That sum is never enough to replenish the coffers during Lent, during Passover, nor in any season. How long must foremothers wait? Then, surrendering to the way of Chief Joseph, corn planter and plenty coup, when released under their own recognizance, such women and their progeny may have had more than several occasions to wonder at their future massacres. What of the marvelous grammar of ritual? Couldn't their deaths have been averted in some way? What of the marvelous grammar of swaddling linens, dead pawn, sacred weaving, half-woven hand-me-downs, leased as totemic items? Today, to whom do these ceremonial accoutrements belong? And the reason I ask that question is because a lot of the sacred medicine bundles are having to be in storage because a lot of the tribes were moved from their ancestral lands, and so they have to put sacred medicine bundles in storage, just like a suitcase or something, and sometimes they end up in dead pawn. Dead pawn meaning you can never get it back because the time has elapsed, so you can't get back your sacred bundle.